Hi folks, you're with Tacitus today at your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio radio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about a touchy subject in the West of evicting or deporting illegal aliens, failed asylum seekers, people that have burned their documents and ditched their documents and told outrageous lies in order to get a asylum claim processed in the West. But just to look at the amount of people that we're talking mass deportation evictions occurring all over the world. Now, I'd heard that there were these sort of things going on, but I had no idea of the scale. Now, we don't hear about it. It's barely, if ever, reported or even touched upon or alluded to, for that matter, by the mainstream globalist controlled media or by the NGO propaganda machine. They seem strangely silent on this. And I was reading a report, or a section of a report for, I think it was Amnesty International, but one of the big international NGOs. And there was mention in there of the amount of people that were getting, in this report, that were getting evicted or who had been evicted in the last 12 months from various countries. Now, they're all third world countries that these evictions are taking place in places like Pakistan and Bangladesh and so on. I guess the NGOs are only interested in first world countries, but just looking at the scale of it, Turkey, around the Middle East, Africa, Saudi Arabia, all these sort of places. The numbers involved in the evictions are truly staggering. 1 million, 2 million people. You're like, wow. So anyway, the report mentioned the amount of people that just in the last 12 months were evicted, and you're talking over 10 million people, and they're saying it's more than that, but they don't know because isn't the ability, get in a third world country with a ramshackle bureaucracy. There's no ability to have the numbers, so it's the NGOs. Now, we've got to contrast this. Say, let's just settle on 10 million. 10 million people were forcibly evicted, and we're not talking eviction of would you please leave, but you're getting out of here. If you're not out of here in a week, we will send people around to shoot you. It's that sort of level of eviction. Like one border crossing, it's alleged that 70 people were shot out of the many thousands that were being evicted because they didn't want to go, or they decided to get difficult with the border guards and that sort of thing. So they just shot them. Some were evicted, brought there on buses and then put across. And then they tried to cross back in somewhere further down the road, and they were shot. And again, hundreds are supposedly shot doing that. So we're talking millions being evicted and moved forcibly at the point of a gun, and many hundreds being shot or losing their lives in the process. Yet we see nothing in the media about it. I'm like, wow. This is a big story, isn't it? I would think, but no, there's no mention of it yet. One failed asylum seeker that's committed murder and multiple rapes in Britain or somewhere in Europe's being deported after a lengthy legal process where the NGOs are spending gazillions of dollars on making sure the guy doesn't get deported, and that's an international headline. It's a national headline. It's an international headline. NGOs are jumping up and down everywhere, making the evil white supremacist Nazis are striking again. This poor brown, and so on it goes. But there's no mention of this. And again, even this report, I think it was Amnesty International, even this report mentioned it sort of in passing. It wasn't making a big deal out of it. It was just sort of casually. There wasn't the usual inflammatory language about it. When you're looking at illegal mass migration into Europe or anything about deporting, but the language is very emotional, very inflammatory. Little tiny babies ripped from the mother. It's that sort of language. Whereas this, hundreds of people being shot and dying, and it's just a very matter of fact, no inflammatory language. It's like an accountant talking about the balance sheet or something. It was, you don't see this sort of language, a matter of fact, just shoulder shrug type language used by the NGOs. Typically, their language is very emotional and super inflammatory, but not on this. Now, 10 million people have been evicted at gunpoint, hundreds shot dead by the evicting party, and this isn't worth an international news story. Where's the outrage? Why are the NGOs not getting up and screaming from the rooftops about the injustices here? Now, if you look at the overall sort of mass immigration message, and remember that the purpose, the globalists are trying to move surplus populations from the dirt poor parts of the world. They're trying to move the surplus populations from there into the rich West. So that's the objective. And now it's reducing the standard of living of the West. It's reducing the quality of life. It's destroying the West's history, the West in every way. There's a small elite that'll do okay out of it. And when I say a small elite, one in every 500 people or so. But it's producing no benefit to the Western citizen. In fact, quite the opposite. But that's considered as quite acceptable. If even one person is going to be deported, just one illiterate brown peasant, then it's an absolute, every emotional, dramatic, inflammatory, stir the place up, agitated device is used to go. The outrage of it is, fascist. Hitler is personally trying to do. So, but somehow 10 million people being evicted is nobody cares. Now, some of the justification, if you sort of read through, you can see the justification is saying, well, these countries that are deporting them are mostly poor. Now, so I say mostly because there are rich countries like, say, Saudi Arabia is a case in point. They're oil rich. They've become rich from the oil, not from anything else. And they've been expelling hundreds of thousands of people. Not all are necessarily illegal, as in arrived illegally, but say their work, they've overstayed the work permit, that type of thing. So there's probably more overstays than there actually are illegals, but nonetheless, they're being evicted at gunpoint and quite ruthlessly. They can appear at a work site and the police and the authorities can appear at a work site. So we're taking you direct to the border and getting rid of you. So, well, can't I go to home? Can't I go to the place where I live and collect my belongings? Nah, too fucking bad. Shouldn't have overstayed. You got no rights now, motherfucker. You're out of here. And if you don't like it, hey, suck on the barrel of this gun. So it's very high-handed sort of tactics. You think they'd say, well, you've got 3 days to get out, but they're taking the view that if we cut you any slack at all, you'll exploit the loophole and you'll just hide somewhere else and find another way of staying. Which, by the way, is not far from the truth. Particularly when you're looking at Arabic-looking people, who do speak the local language and who look the same. It's harder to find them, and so I do get that. So anyway, these evictions are taking place in mostly poor countries. So the argument that this particular NGO anyway was putting up, and I have seen reference to these arguments in other places, again through this agitator NGO type globalization class, where they say, well, the rich countries can afford to take in hundreds of millions of illiterate third world peasants, whereas these other countries, like the Pakistans or the Bangladeshis or the Indias, they can't afford it. So therefore, the West, because it's rich, has an obligation to take in these hundreds of millions of illiterate peasants. And what's more, why is the West rich? The West is rich because it stole everything from all these black and brown people. So these black and brown people are really only going to the West to take back what was stolen from them in the first place. So it's kind of morally justified, so the activists would argue. Now, of course, that's absurd. Everything from the spinning jenny to every modern invention has been white Western, which is why the wealth sort of went to the West, because they were organizationally, technically, scientifically, in every sort of politically, legally, in every respect, it was a superior society. better organized, better managed, technically more advanced and so on. Of course, the wealth is going to go in that direction. It's not going to go to the illiterate peasant subsistence farmer, obviously. So this idea that everything was stolen by the West and that's why the West is rich, that's beyond absurd, beyond absurd. If you look at it, I suppose, in the most hysterical Marxist context of everything, all outcomes should be equal, you could argue it there, but you need to be an hysterical, low IQ moron to even embark on that sort of course of thought. But again, coming back to things, well, the West is rich, therefore is obligated to take that. No, I don't accept that argument even for 1 second. The West is rich because it's well managed, or on a comparative basis, well managed. So by stuffing it full of illiterate peasants, it won't be well managed for long, having affirmative action and all this sort of stuff. So Western wealth is disappearing down the toilet quicker than a mean turd after a night of eating rich Thai food or something. But the mass eviction of people from the other places, like the Pakistans and Saudi Arabias, doesn't get a mention, nor the decidedly brutal tactics of getting rid of them. Now we need to sort of have another sort of dimension here that the globalists and their activists and their propagandists and liars don't touch on, that if you're a dirt poor peasant living a subsistence life and you go into one of the refugee camps, for example, or you go to another place where you also live a subsistence lifestyle and then your circumstances haven't really changed. Sure, you're displaced from your village and from your relatives. I get that. But then these people are encouraged to take a trip to the West, where again they're separated from their village, their culture, and their relatives. They don't seem to have a problem with that. So this idea that they go to, say, a neighbouring country and stay in a refugee camp, more or less, but maybe an improvement actually. You say United Nations run refugee camp, or even refugee camps that are put up by, say, the Pakistani government, and then they're funded by the United Nations or by the NGOs, that supply food and things like tents and so on. So you're still living approximately the same lifestyle as you were. You're not worse off or better off. You're about the same, give or take. And then later on, maybe a year or two, or something, you go back to then the village of your ancestors, and that means you're still moving to like. You're not moving from subsistence peasant remote rural village straight into a first world country where you go, oh, holy fuck, these people got a lot, and because they got so much, they should give me a lot, which is the mentality of most of these peasants, encouraged, by the way, by the NGOs and the globalist activists. But this idea of the mass movement, it means that it's clearly possible. The idea that only the West is obligated not to do mass repatriations is just a pure invention and concoction by the globalist and the activist classes they support. But my hope, given the ruination that's being inflicted on the West by mass migration, I can only hope that someone like Donald Trump wins the election, and that the illegals and the unassimilated migrants, which must be 30 to 45 million in number, will voluntarily go back to the countries of their ancestors and their heritage. I think that would be a good thing. If they've got jobs, they've integrated, they contribute. Well, hey, you can stay. Well, there's nothing wrong with that. If you have, and you're trying your damnedest to integrate and assimilate, nothing wrong with that. But if not, then they should be encouraged through any and all means to go back, to self-deport, and for the criminal element, that they should be actively deported, and that would be a good and wonderful thing for the West and for the Western citizenry. There is only benefit and good that can come from that. And if the activist class wants to complain about it, then they should also complain about when it happens in Pakistan or Saudi Arabia or anywhere else. Now, again, coming back to the idea the West is rich and is obligated, the reverse, that they apply the logic going back the other way and say, well, those countries are poor, so they should not be obligated to take. But again, they're a country of illiterate peasants who are taking in illiterate peasants, and it's all paid for by the United Nations. So I don't see it's relevant that the country's rich or not rich. I don't see any obligation for mass migration comes with the country being. The reason it's rich is because it is well managed and has a buoyant wealth creating economy. By mass immigration with illiterate peasants, you throw all the gears and all the machinery into reverse. So they say, well, they should be because it's rich. They're rich. They should take it. But you're making the country poor as fuck in the process, which means the very justification of riches is lost once you go down that path. You've been able to Tacitus today, your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.